When the current incarnation of the crisis in the church broke out in the early days of the McCarrick scandal, I would often point out that the code of canon law, the tradition of the church, the teachings of the saints, and the writings of some of the great pontiffs in history all lined up against homosexual men serving in the clergy. I, like many others, quoted with relish the following words of St. Peter Damian. For God's sake, why do you damnable sodomites pursue the heights of ecclesiastical dignity with such fiery ambition? Or this gem from the same saint, tell us, you unmanly and effeminate man, why do you seek in another male that you do not find in yourself? Ah, good times. We need more saints like that today, who will speak the truth with the kind of fiery, right-ordered passion that will cause the self-described communist Catholics and their allies who advocate for the acronym agenda to have a mental meltdown of nuclear proportions. The words of the saints are often hard to hear for many because not only do they speak the truth, but often do so with a conviction that makes sinners who defend the disordered fill with unbridled rage. And that is why I love seeing princes of the church stand up and speak the truth in the same way. Cardinal Brandmuller, one of the dubia cardinals and generally thought of as a Benedict XVI type cardinal, has come out and spoken the truth. Now, he, like any of the conservative establishment cardinals, still suffers under serious errors that are relatively mild compared to the clown world the church has become today, and that needs to be acknowledged. But it should still be recognized when these men of the church stand up for the truth, when it is most dangerous to do so. Let's have a look at what the good cardinal said. From LifeSite News. Dubia Cardinal invokes St. Peter Damian, condemns sodomitic filth in the church. The situation is comparable to that of the church in the 11th and 12th century. As an authoritative church historian and as president of the Pontifical Committee of Historical Sciences from 1998 to 2009, Cardinal Walter Brandmuller, 89, has no doubt when he sees the present-day church shaken to its foundations on account of the spread of sexual abuse and homosexuality in an almost epidemic manner among the clergy and even in the hierarchy. How could it have come to this point, the cardinal wonders, and his answer is found in an extensive and detailed article published in the November issue of the German monthly Vatican magazine, directed by Guido Horst. And they have a link here to the original German if you care. Brandmuller refers to the centuries in which the bishoprics and papacy itself had become such a source of wealth that there was fighting and haggling over them, with temporal rulers claiming that they themselves could apportion these offices in the church. And that's actually putting it mildly if you're familiar with that period of church history. The effect was that the place of pastors was taken by morally dissolute persons who were attached to the endowment rather than to the care of souls, by no means inclined to lead a chaste and virtuous life. Again, that's putting it mildly. Not only concubinage, but homosexuality, too, was increasingly widespread among the clergy, to such an extent that St. Peter Damian, in 1049, delivered to the newly elected Pope Leo IX, known as his zealous reformer, his Liber Antigamorianus, composed in the form of a letter, which in essence was an appeal to save the church from the sodomitic filth that insinuates itself like a cancer in the ecclesiastical order, or rather, like a bloodthirsty beast rampaging through the flock of Christ. Sodom and Gomorrah, in the book of Genesis, are two cities that God destroyed with fire on account of their sins. But the thing more worthy of note, Brandmuller writes, was that almost simultaneously a lay movement arose that was aimed not only against the immorality of the clergy, but also against the appropriation of ecclesiastical offices by secular powers. What rose up was a vast popular movement called Pataria, led by members of the Milanese nobility and by some members of the clergy, but supported by the people. In close collaboration with the reformers associated with St. Peter Damian, and then with Gregory VII, with the Bishop Anselm of Lucca, an important canonist who later became Pope Alexander II, and with others still, the Patarini demanded, even resorting to violence, the implementation of the reform that after Gregory VII took the name Gregorian, for a celibacy of the clergy lived out faithfully and against the occupation of dioceses by secular powers. And as a side note here, as part of this new lay movement that's trying to take back the church, no violence, please. Subsequently, of course, it dispersed into pauperist and anti-hierarchical movements on the verge of heresy. That sounds familiar. And was only partially reintegrated with the church thanks to the far-seeing pastoral action of Innocent III. But the interesting aspect on which Brandmuller insists is that the reforming movement broke out almost simultaneously in the uppermost hierarchical circles in Rome and among the vast lay population of Lombardy, in response to a situation considered unbearable. So then what is similar and different in the church today with respect to back then? What is similar, Brandmuller notes, is that then as now the ones expressing the protest and demanding a purification of the church are above all segments of the Catholic laity, especially in North America, in the footsteps of the marvelous homage to the important role of the witness of the faithful matters of doctrine, brought to light in the 19th century by Blessed John Henry Newman. And as then, so now these faithful find themselves a few zealous pastors. But it must be recognized, Brandmuller writes, that the impassioned appeal to the upper hierarchy of the church and ultimately to the Pope to join them in combating the scourge of homosexuality among the clergies and the bishops is not meeting with the correspondingly adequate responses, unlike in the 11th and 12th centuries. I'll let you read the rest of that on LifeSite News. A link, as always, is in the description below. In addition to, of course, that focus on lay movements trying to take back the church, I definitely like the Cardinals focusing on the seizing of the papacy and ecclesial offices by lay powers. It hardly needs to be pointed out that today the secular powers that have enormous influence in society aren't just typical forces of the state, but rather, in a very absurd way that points to this clown world we live in, the clowns and court jesters of our times, the actors and singers that continue to lecture all of us about how we should vote and what we should think is moral, despite nearly all of them living degenerate lifestyles. And this has definitely infected the church today. Just look at this clip of Bono talking about his private conversations with Pope Francis.
We also inevitably, having just come from Ireland, we talked about his aghast, his feeling that he had, I talked about the Pope's feelings about what has happened in the church, and I explained how it looks to some people like the abusers are being more protected than the victims, and you can see the pain in his face, and I felt he was sincere, and I think he's an extraordinary man for extraordinary times.
It's worth noting that Bono openly supported the legalization of baby murder in Ireland in their recent referendum, and he is still considered a faithful Catholic by the celebrity-promoting media. I'm certainly not suggesting that the Vicar of Christ shouldn't meet with public sinners, for our Lord himself did as much. I'm just going to say that I have serious doubts that Bono was corrected by the Pope for his public sins with any force. More recently, Michael Moore bragged about meeting with Pope Francis. This is what the propagandist had to say in an interview with late-night court jester Seth Meyers.
You met the Pope. That must have been pretty cool.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks. What was your interaction with the Pope like?
I went to the weekly audience, and then he asked to speak to me privately. It was an amazing moment, and I asked him if I could ask him a question, and he said yes. And I said, do you believe that an economic system that benefits the few, the wealthy, at the expense of the many is a sin? And he said to me, "Si," in Italian. And I said, so you believe capitalism, the kind of the capitalism we have now, is a sin? He goes, yes, it is. He said the poor must always come first. And then he grabbed my hand. And he said, please pray for me. And I said, I will, and please pray for me. And he said, no, you have to make more movies. And I'm like, I just wanted a prayer.
The infection of the church by globo homo is not an isolated problem. I've long said that one of the problems facing the church today is the embrace of worldliness by everyone in the church, from the typical layperson to the highest reaches of the hierarchy. Politics, social activism, the cult of celebrity worship, all are part and parcel of the religion of the world, and I intend to address the need for Catholics to divorce ourselves from that religion in a video in the near future. Sufficient for now is this: the Church began embracing the world in the years prior to the Council. This began, as far as I can tell, with the Church embarking into financial markets in the aftermath of World War II with the founding of the Vatican Bank, as well as getting directly involved in political processes in Italy and abroad. The intentions at the time were innocent, but like so many things, the door was opened a crack for the values of the world to be embraced. The modernists at the council seized on that opportunity and kicked that door open fully. It was not long after that we were treated to popes becoming globe-trotting activists, and that at the same time whispers about abusive priests began. The problem of sexually abusive priests goes back to the 1940s, in the United States at least. Theodore McCarrick was ordained a priest in the 1960s, amidst the turbulence of the church allowing itself to be infected with this worldliness. In closing, I want you to think about this for a moment. Bono and Michael Moore, two people infected with the errors of Russia, have been given personal, private access to the Pope, but the dubia has yet to be responded to. Since the dubia has been released, Pope Francis has not called the cardinals into conference, which is unusual, and he has avoided doing so because he knows he'll be forced to answer the dubia. Archbishop Vigano's allegations have only been addressed secondhand by party line loyalists, not by the Pope himself. Think about the implications of that, and think about how you can begin separating yourself from the religion of the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you like videos like this, like and share this video and subscribe, and click that notification bell below. You can support my work if you like through Patreon. A link is found in the description below, along with the links to my Twitter, the blog, and the Facebook page I manage. For Return to Tradition, I'm Anthony Stein. Ave Maria.